everyone. So I'm presenting on behalf of my team, Dr. Noel Field and Dr. Susan Mattingly, as well as Vivian Miller, who's our fabulous research team, our team manager on this project. And we've actually presented this project in the 2-year past conferences, and so we're sort of now updating you on the status of what we've been doing as we've rolled out this project. We're finally at the point of having collected some data. So the purpose today is to summarize some of our preliminary findings from the project. Last year, we basically presented a case study of what we would be doing. We implemented this study over the course of this past year, and now we're going to be presenting some of the findings, as well as offering some recommendations for how our results might help to reduce mobility gaps, and then how you could use the technology that we've developed in our study in future research. Bless you. So, just as a quick reminder, for some of you who were here last year, you might remember this. If you're new, this will be new information. What we did was we received a grant from TRCLC to develop a custom app that measures transportation data amongst what we call environmental justice populations, or individuals who tend to experience transportation disadvantage. The technical definition would be an individual who's lower income, has a disability, or is minority race. And what we have found is that traditional transportation planning decisions tend to be made around the transportation behaviors of individuals who are full-time employed, who commute to work between 9 to 5 and use interstate systems. So that's where our transportation planning dollars go and our transportation ideas go. But individuals who tend to be environmental justice characterized are less likely to travel in those typical ways. They are more likely to travel during off times. They are more likely to travel in spiderweb formations. For instance, if you're a mother here, how many times do you go straight to work and home, right? You more likely go to the child care setting to drop off your child, or you go to school, then you go to work. On the way home, you have to go to the dry cleaner, you have to go to the grocery store. Maybe in the middle of work, you had to leave to go and pick up an older adult and take them to a healthcare appointment, right? So many, the traditional way of thinking about transportation doesn't map onto a lot of people's experiences, but we don't tend to have a lot of data about how these individuals travel, so we can't use that to inform improved transportation decisions. In addition, we know that most transportation planning and data collection relies on people's travel behaviors. What we don't find out is where you don't go when you would like to go. And we think that's really important, especially for older adults who are homebound, who don't have the opportunities to travel because the travel's not there. But if they had it, they would do a lot more and be much more engaged in their community. So we wanted to capture traditional planned trips, trips that you took that you didn't plan, but as well as things like trips that you missed because maybe the ride didn't show up, or things that you wanted to do that you weren't able to do, as well as how the missed trips had an impact on your quality of life, and this idea of the relationship between transportation disadvantage and social exclusion. So the entire study was really framed around this last idea of social exclusion, the way that transportation plays a role in our ability to engage in larger society, or to actually inhibit our ability to engage in a larger society. And so you think about social exclusion, and this is a term that was developed through some of the research on poverty with Amartya Sen, and the idea of certain populations in the world, because they are lower income, tend to be disenfranchised across all aspects of society, not just financially, but it's less likely to be able to vote, to have access to high quality health care, to be able to engage in social activities with the rest of their community, et cetera. And we think that transportation plays a key role in the process of either including or excluding certain groups of people from a community. Social exclusion falls along these 3 domains of resources: your access to basic material and economic goods, services, and social resources; your participation, your ability to engage with others at a social level, go to art museums, go to free music concerts in the park, go to sporting events; your participation in civic engagement, voting, your ability to have a voice in your city's governance; and your quality of life, your health, physical and mental, the living environment, so the built environment, and then the safety of your environment. And so again, we're really looking at how does transportation influence people's experiences across those three domains. And so if you think about it, transportation really is sort of, especially in the United States, and particularly in areas where we live, which is a very suburban, car-centric environment. We live in the Dallas-Fort Worth metroplex. If you know anything about anything in Texas, I don't know one Texas community where people are like, guys, this is the most amazing urban walkable city I've ever been to, right? Like we're the exact opposite of Portland, Oregon. And so transportation is literally your lifeline in Dallas-Fort Worth. If you do not have a personal vehicle, you are at a disadvantage across every domain, really. You can't go to both, right? This is why we often have nonprofits during voting season. Their whole job is to get volunteers to drive people to the polls, because you can't vote. You can't get to healthcare. You literally are more likely to die. More difficult to get to school if you want to get your GED. Grocery shopping, and this will come up later in our data. Access to food is, you wouldn't think in the United States that we would actually have this issue, but there are a lot of people who literally do not have access to food because they don't have access to transportation. Jobs, an obvious one. Spiritual practice. How important is that in people's lives? People can't get to church as you get older. You stop being able to go to church because you don't have transportation. So we developed this app in hopes of collecting better data around all these issues. And this is just a table that sort of shows what our app, which we call My Animal, measures compared to traditional data collection methods. And I tried to highlight, but I don't know if it came across as well as I had hoped. But one of the things that we measure that none of the others do is trip challenges. So if you did take a trip, did you experience or encounter any difficulties? Purposes of the trip, the importance of the trip. So rather than just did you take it or not, how important was it? So we want to sort of be able to start ranking and categorizing trips around people's perceptions of how important they are. The impact on an individual's mood, the reason if they didn't take a trip. So we were curious also not just if people chose to travel during one day, but if they didn't choose to travel, why? Was it because they had no access to transportation and they believed that they could have, or was it because they didn't feel like they wanted to get out of the house? But what was going on when they weren't traveling? Consequences if they didn't travel. So maybe they maybe they needed to go to the pharmacy to get a prescription. They weren't able to go to the pharmacy because they had the handy tran ride stood them up or something, and now they don't have the prescription that they need. Maybe they're diabetic and they have to have that insulin. So what are the consequences, right? Are they minor or are they maybe life-threatening? Okay, My Amble has 4 different features to it. The app itself, it has a daily trip planner where we collect those trip data. How many trips did you take? And then we also collected, in the trip planner, they ranked the trips on importance, quality, its impact on the mood, et cetera. We had this interesting feature called a travel buddy, which was actually a text messaging app built into the app, where we had a GRA partnered with each of our participants, and the GRA would send the participants questions that we had mapped onto the app domains of social exclusion to capture qualitative data around their experiences of transportation and its impact on resources, participation, and quality of life. We had a travel story feature built into the app where we had a series of questions about their history of travel because we wanted to understand the context of their experiences with travel over their lifespan. And then we also had this travel logger built in, which had a camera and a video component where they could, if they were driving or walking around or waiting for the bus, they could take pictures of things like the sidewalk that just ends and they're in a wheelchair, or a big gaping hole in the road or something like that, so that they could help us see what their challenges were in real time. So this is a screenshot of the app when you open it up, and these are the 4 components, and you would click on or select one of these when you wanted to use that component of the app. And here's a screenshot of the trip planner. So what is your destination? They had selected grocery store. Where's their destination? So we could get, the app was designed with GPS coordinates so we could find out exactly where they were going, how they were going to get there, how important it is, etc. This is a screenshot of the challenge logger with the camera and the video. And here's just an example of one participant who used the challenge logger to show how he was having trouble with his sidewalk because it was under construction and has been under construction forever, and using the GPS coordinates where we could ping exactly where that had occurred. And then this also just shows we had, the app also has a database where we're storing all the data, and this is how some of the challenge logger data would be stored so that we could pull it. And then this is an example of the travel buddy. So the GRA would select one of those 3 domains of social exclusion and then type in a question. We had created 6 different questions, 2 for each domain. Each of the participants received all 6 questions across the course of 2 weeks when they were using the app. And so the GRA would select participation, type out a question, and then send it to the participant. The participant's app would ding, you have received a travel buddy alert, and then they would open it and respond via text message back to the GRA. And the GRA and the participant would engage in sort of an ongoing dialogue around that question through text messaging. And here's just an example. We asked someone about how does transportation access affect your overall quality of life, and this was the sort of data. I mean, some of these people really enjoyed the travel buddy, as we'll get to later in the results, and gave us very detailed and lengthy responses via text messaging. And I should note that the app also had a microphone feature, so if an individual had dexterity issues, they were able to just speak or record their responses. And then the travel story was where we got people's history. Like, we asked them questions like, what was your first car? When did you learn to drive? When did you stop driving? Why? Etc. Okay, so we conducted a study with 10 older adults living in Arlington and Fort Worth, the cities of Arlington and Fort Worth, which they're part of a very large metroplex. The population of the metroplex overall is the 4th largest in the country, and it comprises 13 counties, which have both rural, urban, and suburban environments. But interestingly, as I said, it's a car-centric environment. Arlington has no mass transit. It has what we mentioned before, paratransit for individuals with disabilities, and it recently implemented VIA, but it has no bus system. Fort Worth has a bus system. Neither of them have a train system. The mean age in our sample was about 70 years old, with small standard deviation. The majority of our participants, 70% or 7, were female, retired, non-veteran, Christian. Everyone had to speak English because at this point we haven't created Spanish language versions of the app or Vietnamese versions, etc. Most lived alone in a senior housing complex or and had resided in their place of residence for a fairly long period of time. There was one individual, as you see from the standard deviation, on how long they had lived in the city. One individual had very, very recently moved, so that's why the standard deviation is so high on that one. The vast majority were non-driving, had no car, and did not have a valid driver's license. So they were, in a car-centric environment, these are individuals who are very much disadvantaged. The vast majority reported using paratransit, and a few half used for the public bus system. So when we looked at their health data, we found that they reported being in good health, but not very satisfied with their physical health. The vast majority had adverse health experiences or problems. They had pain, arthritis, mobility concerns, etc. Over half used a mobility device when walking, but the majority could perform the functions of independent daily living independently. We also asked them some experiences about their technologies because we studied this app based on a tablet device. We found that most had a phone, but 3 had never used a tablet before they actually started the study. Most had access to internet in their homes, but 2 had never accessed the internet prior to using the study. Okay. So in terms of the trip data, The 10 individuals logged 60 trips across 2 weeks, and about a little over half were planned trips, so they planned the trip and they actually went through the trip. They reported, not surprisingly, that most of these trips were very important to them, which would make sense if they're planned trips. Then it's going to be important if you take the time to plan it and then go through with it. Um, Interestingly, though, the three places where people tend to go: grocery stores, healthcare, and social visits. Um, there were only 18 reports about whether or not a trip was not successful. Um, and of those responses, three reported they were able to successfully complete the trip. So they didn't always answer all the questions that we had hoped that they would answer. So only 18 times did they report whether or not it was successful. In terms of the trips, across all of the participants, planned trips ranged from 2 to 12. So there was one person who only took 2 trips, and there was one person who took 12 trips. Mean about 4.5 trips. The median is 4. Unplanned trips, we had one person who took no unplanned trips, and one person who was quite an outlier who took 14 unplanned trips. And then in terms of missed trips, like we said, not a lot of people reported these, but we had one person who had 0 missed trips and one person who reported 2 missed trips. Or up to one person who reported 2 missed trips. We also looked at, because our data were so small, we weren't really able to test for statistical significance. So I'm just reporting descriptives right here. But in terms of the relationship between trips and health, one of the things we did was we looked at the number of adverse health events that they reported experiencing. No one in the sample reported nothing. So the number of adverse health events ranged from 2 to up to 9 different adverse health events they've had in the last 5 years. And so what we did was we grouped people into, we found 5 of our participants said they had between 2 and 4 adverse health events. 5 said they had between 5 and 9. So we broke them into 2 different groups, and then we looked at that relationship with the types of trips that they took. And we did see that those who reported fewer adverse health events, so you might compare them slightly better health, they took slightly more planned trips, but fewer unplanned and fewer missed trips. So those who reported that they had a lot of adverse health events, they were more likely to report unplanned trips or missed trips. And then when we looked at their self-reported health status, those who reported to be in excellent and good health versus fair to poor health, again, we saw those in excellent to good health reported more planned trips. So it seemed as though better health was related in some way to, or at least in this data, we see a pattern of relationship with taking more planned trips. And again, this is not statistical significance. We're not testing for statistical significance here. Now, if you look at some of the themes that came out of the qualitative data, the first one we found was that there seemed to be, the participants seemed to be speaking to diminished emotional well-being due to the transportation disadvantage. So one person said it gets very depressing when you don't have transportation to get to some of the places that you would like to go and spend time there. Another person said, due to our health issues, most of our so-called friends have disappeared. One of the few has a house I cannot get into with a wheelchair, and as for our family, Dawn, who was this participant's partner, has no family left. I have my 84-year-old mother who lives in Keller, which is a neighboring suburb of the Dallas-Fort Worth region, but MITS, which is the paratransit, MITS won't go there. So she relies on MITS to get everywhere. She has no car, and her mother can't drive to her, and she can't drive to her mom. So here she is. This participant was, I think, mid-60s, and she can't go visit her mom, who lives probably like 40 miles away. Barriers to community engagement. Transportation participated one participant from being able to engage in volunteer activities. I would love to volunteer, like nursing homes, hospitals. I love meeting new people, but she couldn't do that because of the transportation. This was something that came up a lot in our data, was constrained autonomy. So one conversation emphasized that the participation's reliance on others to get out of the house meant that she had to rely on others in order to see family and friends and to complete errands. The researcher asked, how do you get out of the house? the person said, well, they have to come and see me or pick me up to go to places. In another instance, the person said, the researcher said, I saw you had an unplanned trip to the pharmacy. I hope you're feeling okay. If you need services like the pharmacy on short notice, how do you get to that? Get out of the house to get what you need? And the participant replied, well, I just have to wait for my sister, a ride for my sister. And then again, the person said again, in terms of going out of the house to see family and friends, well, my brother comes and sees us. So they can't do anything on their own because of the transportation limitations. This was also interesting considering that these were all older adults who were on fixed incomes. Transportation was extremely resource intensive. So in terms of time and money. One participant talked about using the bus and it could be an all-day ordeal. This was especially true when the bus was not on time or scheduled, or they had to take these transfer buses. This other person talking about MITS, the public transit, said the cost for senior citizens and disability people is $4.50 one way. So the total cost is $9 for the doctor's appointment. If you have more than one doctor's visit per day, let's say 5 appointments, it will cost the senior $45 in transportation fee. This therefore takes away from medicine and food allowance. So this is extremely expensive for these older adults who are living on fixed incomes. We also, in terms of our travel story data, this is just a few examples of the results we got. In terms of, we asked them, if you stopped driving, when did this happen? One person said 7 years ago when I was diagnosed with degenerative bone disease. Another person said 15 years ago. One person said when I can no longer afford to maintain a car. So, kind of running out of time, but at the end of the 14 days that our participants use the app, we asked them to sort of respond to a user feedback about how they like using the app. And we got a lot of really good data about how to improve the app, what worked well and what didn't work. So in terms of their satisfaction, for overall experience on a range from 0 to 5, we found, or 1 to 5, we found that people overall very much liked using the app. The mean was 4.6. And they said that it provided a new experience, that the GRAs were very helpful. Instructors were able to help them answer questions, and they felt very comfortable answering questions. And in particular, they reported that they were really engaged in using the app because of the travel buddy feature. This showed up as a very important component of the app, was having this person from the outside who was text messaging them and communicating with them. They found that, interestingly, well, not surprisingly really, the keyboard was, they were less comfortable using the keyboard on the app, perhaps because they were older adults, and the microphone. So there were a couple of technical components about the app that they found a little bit tricky. The app, the microphone, the camera. This was something that we had not anticipated in the project, but the older adults in our study very much liked using the app because they found it was a way to use new technology. So they found that it not only allowed them to record information about their travel, but it also enabled them to learn about using technology, and that was important to them in their lives. And it also helped them to reflect on their experiences of their own transportation and how it was playing a role in the quality of their lives. So this one person said, I enjoyed it, meaning the study, and it helped me to understand my dilemma more about how to get places and made me realize that there are a lot of places I could go if I had a car. And this is exactly what we wanted to find in this study, it was the way that transportation almost constrains our sense of what we could do in the world, right? If you don't have a car, you start over time to stop thinking about where you could go if you had a car. But when you have a car, you're like, gosh, I think I'll, take a road trip this weekend, right? So it almost starts to like shut down your sense of where you live and what you can do with your life. We also asked some open-ended questions about the study, and again, we found that they really enjoyed the opportunity to voice their own experiences regarding transportation. And they also liked the idea of their data being used to help improve transportation. We also found that, again, the ability to access the internet was a motivating factor for people to participate, and we also gave them gift cards to Walmart, which increase their incentives. Um, we gave them an extensive training on the app with the GRA, which we found was very helpful for them. And so we don't kind of skip over this, but I should emphasize that that was very important for this population. Some of our limitations, we originally wanted to sample 20 older adults in this pilot test, but we had a 50% attrition rate due to health concerns, challenges with technology, and internet issues. So there were some people who literally just couldn't use the app. There were some people who we could not get the Wi-Fi to be accessed within their houses. I think this just points to a broader infrastructure issue in our country. A lot of these older adults were living in communities where there was it's almost like we were seeing Swiss cheese holes in the Wi-Fi connectivity across our community. And we went back and forth with Verizon about this, but they were never able to resolve it. And so perhaps looking at slightly less high-risk populations in the future with larger pilot testing, just so you could get more data. Again, Wi-Fi proved to be very challenging. And so what we've decided to do is we're working on another version of the app where the data are stored locally within the app, and then they can just be dumped into a cloud later when you do have Wi-Fi connectivity. Because the way the app currently works is that the data are always every time you use it, the data are being transferred into the cloud via Wi-Fi instantly. Key findings, though, I found it very interesting that so many of the trips were to the grocery store. We really anticipated with this population that that everything they wanted to do was around healthcare, and it wasn't. A lot of it was around food. And if you think about how often you at the last minute are like, oh, better run to the grocery store to get some eggs, right? How much our ability to be fed and well fed is based on our link to transportation. And this is so critical. You think in the United States in this day and age we wouldn't have this issue, but you have individuals who literally can't get out of the house to get food. Also, we found that more health concerns was related to more unplanned or missed trips. So you might think in terms of transportation planning that those who are in poorer health might need more flexible transportation models, such as like a via or an on-demand service. And it may just be because of their health that they're more likely to have unexpected issues come up where they need to get out of the house for a prescription, an emergency visit to the doctor, et cetera. And so they can't always be relying on paratransit and have their trips planned out a week ahead of time. Also, this issue about autonomy. We really need to think about how public transit and its current models really limit the autonomy of individuals and makes them reliant on external factors in order to exercise or to engage in their daily activities. We think that this is an innovative tool that could be expanded. We're currently actually beta testing it now with a new population, which is women with dependent children who are living in an emergency shelter for having fled domestic violence situations. We think, again, that this is sort of pointing to the increased demand for door-to-door services rather than just relying on public bus systems. And we also think that these data can begin to highlight for social service providers the way that transportation disadvantage might be playing a role in their clients' lives. So looking beyond the transportation planning venue. And then we just wanted to express thanks to all of the people who helped make this study possible and our contact information if you'd like to reach any of us. I know we're a little...
out of time, but maybe one or two questions.
Yes.
I was just curious when you're talking about accessing food and if you can't put some sort of transit or transit or whatever. And more food is hard to get to, but number two, you're really limited, especially if you're an older person who can't carry much and you're on a bus or something. So you can't get much of a time, so it actually increases the number of times that you would have to go, but it's hard. It seems like that would be a little problem.
Another issue is when they go to the grocery, a lot of them want to get like a check at the beginning of the month. They want to go and get all their groceries, but they can't get all the groceries off the block. Some of the transit services limit the number of bags that you only have one bag. So I heard some of the stories are someone would go to like Walmart and stock up, and then they come out with a pair of transit driver and they price home with one bag. So they just have to
consideration of, like in many areas, the grocery stores which partially have services where they assemble groceries and actually take them off to individuals. Is
They
that-
can, but the problem is all of these individuals are so low income. All these new grocery services are designed for those who have income to pay for the services. These are these individuals who are very, very, very poor.
So can you talk a little bit, I saw Meals on Wheels as a partner, that
So-
seems like a crucial
so that-
organization and understand this.
Yes, our partner organization is Meals on Wheels, but Meals on Wheels actually serves a pretty economically diverse group of clients. So we were specifically listening to older adults who were also low. Because the adults who are homebound, they might have cars still in another situation.
So I was disappointed more people didn't record missed trips, but then when you're talking about the woman who couldn't get to her mother, like, did that even register her to her as a missed
Well,
trip?
this is a problem that we ran into as well. The transportation almost seemed to, the lack of transportation almost seemed to have affected their ability to think imaginatively about their trips. When we started this study, a lot of the folks, when we asked them, like in the training, so on this trip would be like something, or, we also want you to think about trips that you would take if you could have a car, and they would look at us with blank faces, like, what do you mean? Like, have you ever wanted to just take the road, like, what's on your bucket list of places you want to go to in the United States? And they would, again, just look at them like,
For a birthday party?
yeah, they aren't able to think imaginatively because they've been so long without, they've been so transportation deprived. Right? But we take it for granted that we can, we just are able to think about anything we want to do because we always do it. We don't even understand how that capacity to do that usually things about it.
And so in the context of our study, Arlington is considered like this entertainment place because there's the Dallas Cowboys, Texas Rangers, it's like there's really this great disparity between, there's so many things to do for all ages. These are folks that can't even imagine they want to just go do that. It's in their
Go out to dinner, or, yeah.
Yeah.
But also
So-
because they don't travel much, they also know much about what to do. Everything has to come to them.
Their poverty level though too, they can't imagine doing that because they haven't done that in the past.
It's a real intersection of poverty, age, the disadvantages of the adult environment that really seems to favor upper income white individuals who are resourced.
So how are you using this data to inform or impact, inform like policy change, I guess is what it sounds like.
Well, with 10 participants, you can't,
No.
right?
Right, so how do you?
Well, so the study was partly funded by the Public Protective Council on Government. And so what we've done is said this is something that we think could work. And that's why one of the bullets was we want to try to get that this population that has some of these disadvantaged characteristics that would be more likely to be able to engage for the kind of broader populations that we have in our data. But the qualitative data we can on its own gives you some really powerful stories. And that qualitative data we don't use. So we're using that in our model. And they were I would say that they were very interested in the findings.
and using the app to larger scale. So this was just kind of a pilot. So we'll hopefully use it with other social service providers and you can do the top.
I think in developing that, I've had it before, it's an extraordinarily time-intensive process, it's very iterative, and so a lot of it was just working on it. So now that we've gotten under more strong development, there's more than
Thank you. The lunch is downstairs.
Yeah, the lunch is downstairs, back to you, home.